Like in the Baird model, when you build that, it does not account for making any adjustments. So if we built this, made a cut, but didn't make any adjustments in here, it will absolutely have a snowball effect, right? An avalanche effect, I call it. You know, so yes, if you defer and have no plan and anything to do with it, it's gonna catch up with you for sure. The one part would be is if something really changes out there. And what we have seen in the world of technology, the smart boards we replaced at the high school with a projector, those projectors were less than if you went with a smart board projector combo.
We paid $3,000 each for those. By the time you bought the projector and the 100-inch board.
Yeah. What's a brand new projector and a brand new smart board?
These kind?
Yeah.
The old style that we have
Yeah.
now. So the board is about $1,500 and the projector is $500. So it's cheaper to put those in,
Okay.
just to replace what we currently have.
Yep.
But I would like to look at
It's
what's out there,
antiquated
what's
technology.
new, what's right, what's
Well, that's
working.
where I was hoping those 10 of them would fill in for a year.
Well, and they could. We could, we're not having, I'm
Yeah.
not saying we're having an issue, the smart boards are working, I'm not having anyone say theirs aren't. We've had a couple that we've taken out and put one of those spares in, so I know we probably replaced 3 over the last year. But we could defer that another year, you know, and move it down. But this is based on the fact that we have in the district 50 of, well, this is based on replacing 50 of them. I'd have to look back at my numbers, how many total we have in the district. I thought it said like 72 smart boards are in the district. So to replace 10 a year, that's making them 7 years each.
That's really
You know,
modest.
so that's still asking for a 7-year lifespan on them doing 10 a year, because
10 years, nothing.
you could defer it, but then are you gonna have to buy 20? I mean,
Yeah.
the whole idea is
That's
to
when
get
you
it on
get to that
cycle.
point, you gotta figure out what you gotta do.
Yeah.
If
One
you
of the
got the
things,
70,000 or not, then.
to compliment Sue, she did work with a consultant to help.
Heartland had this template, and then we were, I said, oh, I need to do a 5-year plan, you need to come in. And then they're like, oh, we got a template for you, they had everything
Yeah,
I needed.
so it's
So
awesome. All right, thanks.
Should do something on
We can take action on each motion. Keep going. All right, so Ryan, right?
Time's up.
So,
No,
cut you off already, you're done, thank you.
Warned a couple of you last night and you came anyways.
So, do you want me to go right to the fund
Yeah, the
balance
fund balance. So the
presentation?
first thing I'm gonna do is fund balance. I gave a presentation, I took a presentation I did 2 years ago when we bought the 3 buses, so you can see the impact of it. And then we kind of touch on where fund balance is every year. This goes back to like a more detailed one, which now gives you an update of fund balance percentage. And it has a lot of definitions, which is good to touch base on for Tatiana and Jennifer to help them even just get that ground knowledge of it all. So the first part, why it's important to understand. Some of the stuff I'm going to read word for word, other stuff I'm not going to read at all. Administrators and board members need to understand what a fund balance is and its importance in budgeting decisions. A common misconception is that fund balance is a cash account and therefore corresponds to the district's bank account. Fund balance actually represents the fund's total assets minus its liabilities. So what a fund owns minus what it owes. At the end of the fiscal year, we might have, $1.5 million of accounts receivable from municipalities for, or in this case, Dodge County, for the second part of their tax payment to the district. That's an asset. It's not actually money in our bank account until we get it from them. Same time when we accrue teacher payrolls at the end of June, we record it as a liability, even though we're not actually sending that money out the door in the form of a paycheck until July and August. But it's something that we've incurred as a liability. Cash is an asset, and that's noted on here. It's not the only asset. Like I said, you could have taxes receivable, and then the fund could also have liabilities such as accounts payable or payroll accrued. Just an overview of the separate funds that we have. Fund balances accounting is used to organize accounting systems on a fund basis. A fund is a separate set of accounting records segregated for the purpose of carrying on an activity and established for accountability purposes to demonstrate that financial resources are being used only for permitted purposes. So Fund 10 is our general fund, that's obviously the most significant fund that we have. Fund 27 is special education. Throughout the year, the special education fund will be in the negative. Fund 27 cannot end its fiscal year in a negative fund balance, so we just do a Fund 10 transfer that covers it all. So that will be at zero at the end of the year. Fund 39 is our referendum debt pool. All we really do in there is house the portion of Fund 39 referendum debt that comes in the form of taxes. So it's easily set aside, like if somebody says, how much Fund 39 tax revenue have you received, that's sitting right here, because that is specifically reserved to make the Fund 39 debt payments. Fund 49, that's where the referendum bond proceeds were housed, that's where any referendum bond interest was recorded, that's where any expense relating to referendum is sent out. In this case, since the referendum has wrapped up at the end of the fiscal year, Fund 49 fund balance will be zero. Fund 50 is food service. There's about $1,163 in the food service fund balance. That also cannot ever have a negative balance if it gets to the end of the year. And it's a negative. In this case, what that 1163 will supplement any loss this year. If it goes beyond that, then Fund 10 also has to pick up the loss in food service. Fund 60 is activity and scholarship, so anytime we get checks in that are going to be for scholarship payments, they get housed in the Fund 60. We also have separate bank accounts for those. And then anytime the scholarships are paid out, they're paid out of that Fund 60 account. Same thing with any activity account that we run. And then Fund 80 is new this year to Mayville. That's where the tax funds that we get in from municipalities for Fund 80, they'll be deposited to Fund 80, so we can clearly state those cannot be used for Fund 10 purposes. That is for the tutoring, for the people that are running that, as far as employees, for the small amount of supplies that we put in there. So as though they're getting paid for whatever percentage of their services are relating to the tutoring, they're getting paid out of Fund 80, and the tax money's kind of sitting there too. It's possible that there's more money in Fund 80 if for some reason we don't incur as many labor hours for those tutoring employees, or we don't need as many supplies that are in the budget. In that case, it would also just carry over a fund balance, which we would factor into next year when we set the Fund 80 budget. Some fund terminology. Each fund has a balance sheet, accounts consisting of assets, liabilities, and then the fund balance, which is also kind of the equity of that fund, in a series of revenue and expenditure accounts. A fund balance is created or increased when fund revenues exceed fund expenditures for a fiscal period. A fund balance is decreased when fund expenditures exceed fund revenues. The balance sheet accounts identify the assets that belong to the fund, such as a cash or a grant payment receivable, and what liabilities it owes, such as accounts payable to a supplier. The difference between the fund's assets and liabilities equals the fund balance. In normal accounting terms, it's considered equity. The 5 different fund balance classifications, a lot of words here, it's going to be most beneficial to just kind of read them all. These are kind of the biggest ones, because there's 2 items on here that we actually have that the board could take action on. It doesn't give any more money to the district, it's just reallocating how those funds are termed to, and I'll point those out when we get there. So non-spendable, those are amounts that cannot be spent because they are not in spendable form or are legally or contractually required to be maintained intact. So inventories, prepayments, loans, or receivables. You don't actually have that money on hand, so a fund balance could be propped up because you have a receivable, but it can't be spent because it's just not in spendable form. Restricted funds have constraints placed on the use of the resources. Can be imposed by creditors, grantors, contributors, or by law or regulation. Those would be the scholarship or any athletic donations. If you get, I didn't list it on here, what a Fund 21 donation, when I was at Beaver Dam, they would get donations that could be for a scoreboard, specifically for a baseball scoreboard, and it cannot be touched for any other purpose, just like scholarships and stuff like that.
But those are considered in the overall, when people say, oh yeah, we got 25% fund balance, things like scholarship funds, the donations, those are included because it's an overall.
Well, the fund balance that we talk about is Fund 10. They're not included in the Fund 10 balance. Those would be in the Fund 60 balance.
Okay.
Yeah. Committed, so committed funds place constraints imposed by formal action from highest level of decision-making authority, the school board. Constraints can only be removed or changed by the same form or formal action. So at this point, there's $100,000 that's still sitting on our formal DPI submitted balance sheet as committed funds. There's $100,000 in there, so when DPI looks at it, it's like that $100,000 you committed to using it for this purpose. The board, next board meeting could say we want to take that out. And then it gets factored into the fund balance percentage, which I'll point out. So, but that's still sitting in there. Simply, it was here when I started and there's never been an action to take it out.
So we need that this year then to be
Yeah,
final,
good,
because it's
yeah.
been included at the whole entire time.
Same
We've
thing
been
with,
open about it.
same thing with the assigned, it's just a little different terminology. Those are amounts that are constrained by intent to be used for specific purposes, but meet neither the restricted nor committed forms of constraint. So as of right now, there's also $100,000 in there, and that was in there when I started. The idea was $50,000 was for the bus allocation, and $50,000 was for tech updates. So that's a situation where if you get to the end of the year and you don't need to buy something, you can set it aside, like earmark it for this. And then let it build up, and suddenly like, we need a bus, and it's like, by the way, we've kind of been setting it aside as we've assigned fund balance to a new bus purchase.
Before, you couldn't take that off as expense, now you can, right?
Well, it hasn't been spent, it's not until you spend it that it.
You need a resolution in order to get it
To
out,
move it out?
signed.
Yeah,
I thought there was
from the
something now
committed, I
that
think.
you can, you can put money aside and still take it off that year.
The Fund 46, is that like, is like a DPI benefit?
There was something new last year that come in finance. Oh, never mind. I know the county uses all this and it gets very complex.
Okay. And then the unassigned is where everything else kind of sits. So right now, we'll get to it, there's about 3.5 million that's unassigned, which in theory is just continuing operations, payroll, supplies. It's not earmarked for anything specific other than like general budget needs. The next page is their defined standard. This is strictly a local or school board matter. The Wisconsin Department, the DPI makes no recommendation on what it should be. It does notate district with appropriate fund balance can avoid excessive short-term borrowing and interest costs, accumulate sufficient assets to make designated purchases or cover unforeseen expenditure needs, and demonstrate financial stability and therefore preserve or enhance its bond rating. So when we look at where the percentage is at now, some of the things to keep in mind is if it goes down and you have to borrow now, you not only lose the interest that you get during the year, now you're paying additional interest. A couple years ago when we made those 3 bus purchases, well, the money was there. So there was no worry for it because it had been sitting there. And then the other one is just that bond rating, which those bond ratings, we're going to talk about those later. We don't really get new bond rating until there's actually the need for one. So if you look at any referendum down the road, if you start to chip away at the fund balance, it is going to play a role in your bond rating. The Mayville School District's policy, the district has a commitment and policy to maintain an unassigned year-end fund balance of at least 15% of the anticipated fund expenditure budget for each subsequent fiscal year at 15%. It would be anticipated that short-term borrowing would be needed at various times during the year, while the district awaits large payments such as taxes or larger state aid payments. So we're well above that 15%. You saw the unassigned were in there, so that's what our fund balance is going to be presented on. So if you guys were to move that 100,000 over, your fund balance percentage is going to go up because right now it's assigned, so we can't consider it as really available as fund balance.
And just to clarify, we're talking Fund 10 fund
Yeah,
balance.
yeah. So the next page, this is also kind of a snippet of where we ended up at the end of June 30th, the fund balance as of June 30th. We had roughly $2.6 million of cash and investments, $1.7 million of taxes receivable from Dodge County, $147,000 in accounts receivable, And then the due from other funds of around 340,000. That's a timing issue because when we pay referendum payments out of pocket and then get our reimbursement from PMA when they're housing our funds, as of June 30th, we had made payments out and we're just waiting for PMA to wire money and reimbursing us. So that was due from Fund 49 at the time, June 30th. Due from other governments, 302,000, that would be federal and state grants that were still payable to us at the end of the year that related to last school year. And then prepaid expenses, if we had teachers going to a training in July or August, technically it didn't occur during the fiscal year, so we would have prepaid the registration or prepaid for a service to say CISA. That doesn't start until after July 1st, so technically it's a prepaid asset because they have not provided any services yet. So the total assets, $5,129,239. And then on the liability side, you'd have a little bit of accounts payable for bills that came in late that were invoiced before June 30th. That checks would have went out in July or August. Accrued salaries or wages, accrued payroll taxes and withholdings, and then due to other funds. So those, the two big ones, the accrued payroll and taxes and the accrued salaries, that's teacher paychecks that get issued in July and August for their 2018-2019 school services. So it earmarks that money as it's already been committed. So the total liabilities around 1.3 million. The difference between the total assets and the total liabilities is $3,774,072. That's technically your overall fund balance, and then you get into that language of what is uncommitted, or unassigned, I should say. So the net result is a 2019 fiscal year fund balance of $3,774,072. Of that, $100,000 sits in committed, $100,000 sits in assigned. So you have to back that out to your unassigned fund balance of roughly 3.5 million. So that's the number that we're going to use to calculate this percentage on the next page. So this is the unassigned fund balance percentage of expenses by year. And you can see how it kind of built up starting in the 2008-2009 school year all the way up to 38% in 2013-14. And then it kind of dipped down in 14-15, went back up in 15-16, and then since I was here, I know why it dipped in 16-17. That would have been the purchase of the school buses. And then from 17-18 to 18-19, we increased by 2,000, so it basically remained the same. And because we have a budgeted loss this year, that's why it would drop to 25.34%. So that's the number when you look at what the district's policy is. It says 15%, well, we're at 25%. If at some point that other $200,000 gets moved back in there, that's going to jump to probably 30%, if not a couple percentage points more.
What's the history of the district commitment to a unassigned year-end fund balance of at least 15%?
That's a policy.
Yeah,
The 15% is a policy.
So that was a policy that was established years ago by?
I would say based on like a DPI, well, it says there's no recommendation.
Right.
It's like a best practices that's
Okay.
out there.
Well,
The
best
15%.
practice is been there
City
for
government.
40, 50 years.
Okay,
The
so
other-
it's been that for the whole time?
The other part is there's a spot in the budget where we get to short-term borrow. And so when you do that, now you're paying money to
Pay
I
bills.
like to
pay
see
bills.
I'd
Okay.
like to see our fund balance.
So we're gonna, that's, right after Ryan's done with this section, let's take a pause and we're gonna go to the actual key performance indicator and fund balance. We'll just speak to that and just have a little bit of time.
Okay.
So, and the fund balance is relative to the overall budget too.
Right.
You know, so if a budget went down for a year, the fund balance didn't change, hey, percent fund balance just went up. Dollar amount really didn't change that much, but the percentage did. So, it's an interesting factor right there.
And when it did go up that high, all of us at the end of the year, we get $100,000 from the federal for special education, which we never had figured on.
It was Medicaid. They were doing catch-up payments.
So that's why it's not.
Those are gone.
Yeah.
But yes, that's where that came from. That was,
And then it was a good year for us, we had, was almost $5 million.
Your fund balance ended up at.
No, $500,000
Yeah.
that we were.
Well, like you said, if you lower, if your fund balance grows a little bit, and then that next year you don't budget as much, so that's a double change.
Takes
So
care of it,
something
yeah.
comes off on that
That's right there.
So the last part I'll cover on there is like a cash flow report. We do have a longer term cash flow report that is maintained to track what times of year the cash on hand may run low. Currently, there are no periods of the year where the district would require short-term borrowing. The lowest projected point the rest of this fiscal year would occur in late January, and that's just before tax payments come in. So if that fund balance does start to come down, that's where the day-to-day, like, what's our tracking of when does our health insurance payments go out, when does this insurance payment go out, or our quarterly HSA contributions, that's where you would look like, at what point of year do we possibly have to borrow? Can we shorten it to a week instead of a month? So that's one thing. Before we get to like the report card, I did put on page 1 of the packet, when we went to the Baird workshop, there is a Wisconsin Flyway School District comparables in here, so you can see what some comparable districts carry for fund balance. I'm not gonna talk about other districts by name on here, but you can kind of see where they're at and how we compare. The graph number in white is our total budget in millions, and then the fund balance in millions is the purple number, and then the triangle number at the top is the percentage of fund balance. So we're at, it says 26% on there. If you put that $200,000 in it, it's gonna go up around 30, and you can see some of the other districts.
Okay, good. So with that, the board policy is 15%. Okay, so that's, but where are we currently at is, just to reiterate it, it's at 26%. So 26% based upon the metrics that we put in your packet for fund balance, which is page 7, I put up on the screen also, would say at that point in time, we are at exceeding expectations. So if 15% is the minimum, right, that's the board policy, we actually using, this came from other districts when we're not the only ones who are kind of adopting this format of this continuous improvement action plan. So they put fund balance at a 12 to 17%, that would be meeting few expectations. We believe that 15%, we're probably doing short-term borrowing when we were looking at that. So there's a spot in this that we would be concerned about. So coming here, one of the like thumbs up that I received, or like something that you celebrated as a board, was that you didn't short-term borrow. I recall that. I'm just speaking to the financial stability of the school district, and that you've never short-term borrowed funds. So it's like, okay, what so what do you think? And you don't have to have an answer right now, but eventually this is yours that you're adopting. We provided, here's what we think as an administrative team, looking at others, working with CISA, our leadership group there. We believe that meeting expectations is in that 18 to 23% zone, 24% to 29% is exceeding. Anything above that is significantly exceeding. So, but we have to decide upon that. So in this draft version, we're giving ourselves exceeding expectations at that 26%. And I guess our goal would always be, as an administrative team, leadership group, we want to be meeting, at minimum we want to be meeting, most of the time we want to try to be exceeding, right? So significantly would be, wow, that'd be an exception.
So January, you think is going to be lower than in November?
It always is, yeah. We won't have any worries, but it just.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be our lowest draw.
Yeah. Right before all that money comes in.
And when does the money come in? Oh, you're right, it does come in January.
And then we'll have a little lull again before they come in.
But I mean, we weren't anywhere close to being
Which,
drawn out.
No.
that topic that Brian is speaking about, that actually is in the current
Yeah,
legislative
that sounds like
Correct.
world.
Yeah.
So they're discussing having just equal payments coming in monthly.
Correct, in
so
order
that you
to,
can
that
budget.
which is stop.
So that should actually help this.
It
would help a cash flow
It'll
thing.
help cash flow quite a bit.
Yeah, there
Matter
would
of
be
fact, it'll help
districts.
A lot of school districts that don't short-term plan.
Yeah,
that use
districts that
short-term
have
plan.
lower fund balances
It'll help
would be
quite
in
a
a
bit.
better